Dontayvion Wicks has been traded to the Eagles. We'll dive into his fantasy value next.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is the Fantasy Football Hall of Famer, Michael Fabiano, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets. If your first bet wins, head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. We are discussing the Dontayvion Wicks trade from the Packers to the Eagles. We're going to talk about Matthew Golden's updated dynasty value. We'll talk about what this means for A.J. Brown, who's likely to be playing football elsewhere this year. But, Fabs, I want to start with this trade with Wicks going from Green Bay to Philadelphia. This is a guy that I've liked for a long time. The trade compensation is a 5th-round pick and a 6th-round pick. He also got a new deal, which I thought was fascinating. It was about, $12.5 million, I believe, according to Ian Rappaport. What was your initial gut reaction on the trade?
That AJ Brown's gone.
Yes.
That was the first thing I thought of. I'm like, it's been rumored where there's smoke, there's fire typically. And when you bring in another wide receiver and they've already brought in Hollywood Brown, they signed Elijah Moore, somewhat of a lesser move. And, they could potentially pick up a 1st-round pick here if this trade with New England, which is rumored, would be done before the start of the NFL draft. So at this point, it's not a good move for Dontayvion Wicks because he's behind 3 other dudes. But when and if, and I guess I'm more on the when side, AJ Brown gets traded, well, suddenly Dontayvion Wicks has a shot to be a top 3 receiver in Philadelphia. And he would hold certainly more value than he has now in Green Bay. And we're going to talk about the Packers wide receiver room here in a second. But if we're assuming that Brown is dealt, then DeVonta Smith obviously see his stock rise. I know that you've been big on trying to trade and acquire him in your dynasty leagues. I don't know that Hollywood Brown's value goes up exponentially. I'm sure it helps if A.J. Brown is traded. And then Wicks certainly becomes a guy that could potentially have some flex value. I'm not going to say that he's going to come out and break out and be this superstar wide receiver, because if he were that good, he already would have done that in Green Bay. I think he's a good player. I just don't know that he's going to come out and become some sort of fantasy football force that you're going to start every single week. But in Philadelphia, once again, assuming A.J. Brown is traded to New England, which is the rumor, he suddenly has more value than being the wide receiver 99, which is where he currently is.
So let's just assume that A.J. Brown is not on this team and he gets dealt on June 2nd to the Patriots. And again, we're going to talk about that at the end of the show. But if that is the case, I think Wicks is pretty clearly the 2nd best receiver on this team. Hollywood Brown at this stage of his career is just a depth piece, right? I don't think you can rely on him to be more than a wide receiver 3 at best. We should also mention that the new offensive coordinator in Philadelphia is Sean Mannion, who was the quarterback coach in Green Bay last year. So it's clear that they like him. And I also wonder, Green Bay just had so many different mouths to feed in that offense that it was really hard for a guy like Wicks to become a consistent player in this offense. But there were a lot of times when he started, I thought he looked pretty good. You look at some of the advanced metrics like open rate and ability to win after the catch, and he's phenomenal at those two. Now, he's got to learn how to catch the ball and be more consistent. But I guess I'm envisioning this, Fabs, as a situation where he's going to know this offense. I think he's pretty clearly the 2nd most talented receiver. He's being paid to be a number 2 receiver in Philadelphia. I think he does have a little bit of fantasy value.
A little bit, though. Yeah, I would agree. A little bit. I mean, let's be honest. Green Bay drafted 2 wide receivers, including one in the 1st round last year when they had Dontayvion Wicks. So they didn't love him. If they did love him, they would have given him more burn. I don't know what the deal was. I know they had a crowded wide receiver room, but doesn't the cream rise to the top, as Macho Man Randy Savage once said, with the little cream?
It's too early in the morning for me to do it. My Macho Man
impersonation. WWE promos of all time. I love that. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
He would have risen to being a starter, and he never did. So that's why I like the move for Dontayvion Wicks, because it's twofold. He's going to get a shot to be more of an asset in Philadelphia, again, assuming AJ Brown is traded and Green Bay's receiver room continues to shrink. And we want that because there's too many guys, too many cooks in the kitchen, as they like to say. So I guess I am tempering expectations for Wicks, but I do like the move because I think Brown's going to get traded. And as you mentioned, based on the money, and listen, the Eagles may not be done. They may add another wide receiver via the draft. There's wide receivers out there right now on the free agent market, or who could potentially be traded, that they could make a move on. Like, I mean, this might sound crazy, but like, we're not talking about Brandon Ayuk at all. He'd be wicked cheap for any team to go out and acquire from the Niners. I just don't know if the Niners would trade a wide receiver to the Eagles, but it doesn't mean that the Eagles are done at wide receiver. They could potentially draft somebody. If AJ Brown is dealt, they have an additional first-round pick. So the picture hasn't been done yet. It's still in the process of being painted for the Eagles in terms of their wide receiver room.
I suppose it's possible they could draft a receiver early. I did want to mention the dynasty value here. Dontayvion Wicks, going into the month of March, wide receiver 99. He's only 24 years old, Fabs. And I think, again, to me, I think he's a clear-cut number 2 in Philadelphia. I would just much prefer him over guys like Pat Bryant and Adonai Mitchell and Troy Franklin. And those guys are being drafted like the wide receiver 60 range. So I do think this increases his dynasty value.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if this is the only receiver move that Philadelphia makes, again, assuming AJ Brown is traded, I think that's phenomenal news for DeVonta Smith, right? And honestly, that's my takeaway is go buy DeVonta Smith right now because he's only going to get more expensive.
Yeah, because the Eagles are not going to bring anyone in who would usurp him as the number 1 option in the offense. He's got obviously a rapport with Jalen Hurts, has a great knowledge of the offense. Manning's going to utilize him as the one if Brown is gone. So yeah, DeVonta Smith would be the big winner at wide receiver if Brown is in fact out. And again, I'm not saying that I don't love the move for Dontayvion Wicks. I just, prove it to me, man. Because in Green Bay, he didn't.
Does this make you feel any better about Jalen Hurts, or is it exactly the same?
I don't love that he's losing AJ Brown. AJ Brown was his number 1 wide receiver.
Oh, he hasn't lost him yet, but that sounds like the plan, right?
Right. So could that drop Hurts a couple of spots? Sure. Is he going to drop out of the top, 6 quarterbacks in fantasy? Probably not.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like this Wicks trade. I've been a Wicks fan for a long time. He's only 24. He can play in the outside. He can play in the slot. He's got really good size, 6'1", 205 pounds. I would not be surprised if a change of scenery and more consistent targets makes him a much, much better football player. And I don't want to compare him to George Pickens because it's not fair, but we saw last year how, a talented guy like George Pickens goes to an offense that gives him more consistent targets and all of a sudden becomes a fantasy superstar. That's not Wicks, but I do think having a solid role week in and week out, rather than being the number 2 receiver some weeks and then the number 5 receiver other weeks, is going to help Wicks. I'm buying.
I agree. I want him to prove it out there though, because he had opportunities to move up in Green Bay and never did really. So if he gets out there and he gets that number 2 job, assuming no Brown, it's all on his shoulders to go out there and prove that he can be a wide receiver 2 in this league. And certainly his value will rise and has risen already because everyone already assumes AJ Brown's going to be wearing the red, white, and blue next season.
All right, let's talk about the Packers side of things because now they've just lost 2 receivers this offseason, Romeo Doubs and Dontayvion Wicks. What does this mean for Matthew Golden? What does it mean for Christian Watson? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old ways of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment that's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide, and you can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar that you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing that your taxes are being handled right. So head over to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today.
Workplace chaos, deadline stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, this is a job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed, Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, the skills, experience, the location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that really says it all. In the time I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Spend less time searching and more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. When you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to a group chat with me and several other listeners of the show. Tap the link in the show notes or go to lockedondynasty.supercast.com. All right, Fabs, let's talk about the Green Bay part of this because they've now lost two contributing receivers, Romeo Doubs and Dontayvion Wicks, in the same offseason. Now, they've done a ton of work on these receivers in this year's class, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they drafted one sometime late, day 2, early day 3. But as it stands right now, who is the most valuable Packers receiver in dynasty leagues?
I battle with this because I do not love Matthew Golden as some guy who's going to potentially be a number one fantasy wide receiver. But he's the youngest of the core group now. I still think this means Christian Watson's the best breakout candidate for this season. And he looked good last year when he played. That's the big bugaboo with him. He's got to stay healthy. If Watson could stay healthy, I could see him being a wide receiver too in fantasy. In fact, I could see him being a really good wide receiver too in fantasy because you just dropped 131 targets from last year's roster between Romeo Doubs and Dontayvion Wicks. So there's a lot of options. And listen, when you get behind Watson and Golden and Jaden Reed, you got kind of a bunch of curtain jerkers, right? Bo Melton and Savion Williams and Jacoby Keeney James. They signed Sky Moore. Who cares? So obviously Tucker Kraft factors into the target share as well. I think the biggest winner, though, is probably Golden because Watson was already going to be Watson. He was already going to be playing that role. Maybe his 5.5 targets per game average goes up, and I think it will. But Golden only averaged 3.1 targets per game last year. That's going to rise exponentially. And Jaden Reed only averaged 3.1 targets per game last year, and that's going to rise as well. So all three Packers wide receivers win. That was the big issue with us in fantasy when it came to Green Bay. Too many mouths to feed, too many cooks in the kitchen. Well, now there's not as many mouths to feed. Really, you got 4 guys if you factor in Tucker Kraft in terms of the receivers. So Watson's a big winner here, but I think Golden's the biggest winner from all of these moves that have been made.
I'm glad that you brought up the point about the Packers having too many mouths to feed because I thought there were times last year where it was actually detrimental to their team. I think it's good in theory to have a wide receiver by committee approach, 4 or 5 guys that can, all be interchangeable. But when it's 3rd and 7 in a big game, you kind of need to have that one guy that you just know the ball is going to, who is going to get open. And I thought it really hurt them down the stretch, in that Bears playoff game. So I think condensing the targets down to 2 or 3 guys will be really beneficial. Now, we know Tucker Kraft, assuming he's healthy, is going to be one of those guys. And we know that Christian Watson is going to be one of them as well because he's got a very defined role in this offense, right? He's the downfield guy. He's the deep threat. He's going to be running a lot of the over routes and all that kind of stuff. I do think it's a toss-up between Reed and Golden as to who will be that other guy. My gut tells me it's going to be Golden because you spent a first-round pick on Golden, and you kind of need to justify the value. But Jaden Reed's a good football player, and I do think he's going to play in the slot a bunch. But I think overall, I'm with you. Matthew Golden was being drafted as wide receiver 51 over on Dynasty League Football. Jaden Reed, wide receiver 53, by the way. I think Golden's probably going to see the biggest move up. I think he's going to go into that, like the Jordan Addison range, wide receiver 39, wide receiver 40. But I think of all the players in this offense outside of Tucker Kraft, I want Christian Watson.
Me too. Yep, me too. I know the injuries are an issue. When the guy plays, he has proven to be a very valuable asset from a fantasy perspective. Not elite, but in a best case scenario, I can see him again being a wide receiver too. And remember, Green Bay does not have a first round pick in the draft. So they have the 52nd, the 84th, the 120th, and then every other pick is round 5 or beyond. So
what happened to the first round pick?
What's that?
What happened to their first round pick?
Well, let's see if the Cowboys mess it up or not. It's Jerry Jones, so he probably will. But the fact of the matter here is that Green Bay has more needs on defense than they do on offense. And so even if they do draft a wide receiver, I don't see them drafting a wide receiver at one of the first 3 picks. They have defensive needs, the defensive backfield, the linebacker. So I really don't know that they're going to draft a wide receiver who's going to make any kind of dent in terms of targets in year 1. So I think the top 3 guys are the top 3 guys. And you could feel real good about Christian Watson going into next season. You could feel better about Matthew Golden. I think you feel better about Jaden Reed with, again, well over 100 targets off of this roster.
Anybody else you like on this roster, like down the depth chart at all? I keep looking at it. It's like
but that's really going deep.
Yeah, I mean, Savion is there, but he's really more of a glorified running back than anything else.
He's like Cordero Patterson 2.0 kind of.
Yes. Again, I think this is great news for Green Bay's long-term outlook on offense. Now, we should mention Christian Watson signed an extension last year, but I believe he's got 1 more year left on his deal. Then he's eligible for a new contract. I believe Jaden Reed's on the final year of his contract. Matthew Golden's obviously in year 2, so he's got some time. But I wouldn't be surprised if this receiver core continues to be turned over the next year, and all of a sudden it's just Matthew Golden and who knows? Maybe somebody they draft late day 2.
I don't believe in Golden as an alpha.
That's the thing is I just didn't love the talent even last year at the draft. I did not love it.
I think his fantasy ceiling is like a 3 flex. I don't even see him being like a 2. And maybe I'm going to be wrong ultimately, but I mean, you're a first round pick and the Packers didn't really, get to see much out of him as a rookie. That certainly is going to be in the back of minds of fantasy managers and dynasty managers who are in startup leagues, but he's young. He can be explosive. He's wicked fast. We all know that. So the value is on the rise.
All right, let's talk about AJ Brown, the elephant in the room right now, because it sure seems like he's going to get traded after June 1 when the contract becomes much more favorable for the Eagles to trade. Assuming he does go to the Patriots, what does that mean for his dynasty value? We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters. Every matchup is magnified and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. And here's what I like about it. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, and key moments. It makes the entire playoff experience more engaging from start to finish. I love that we've got some unbelievable matchups in the Western Conference this year, including my Lakers that are going to be shorthanded against the Rockets. I believe they're plus 600 on FanDuel right now to win the series. We'll see. I'm not very optimistic, but it's all available over on FanDuel.com. So go to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Babs, let's talk about AJ Brown, who is pretty clearly unhappy in Philadelphia. He's been wanting out now for a while. We had a rumor from our guy Ricky on Twitter. Again, I know it's a dog, not really, but it's an insider that's been incredibly right on all these predictions this offseason, who said that there's an agreement in place between the Patriots and the Eagles where Brown will be traded on June 2nd to New England. First of all, do you think that happens? And second of all, if it does, what does that mean for his dynasty value?
I'm reading the tea leaves, and yeah, again, when the Eagles acquired Wicks, the first thing I thought of was that Brown's gone, which we kind of already were speculating.
Because otherwise,
on.
why are you trading picks and giving Wicks a contract and signing someone like Elijah Moore and signing Hollywood Brown?
Yeah.
Like it's too many mouths to feed unless somebody's getting moved.
Right, exactly. And the thing though is that Philadelphia this year, when you look at the draft, and I'm going to be interested to see what they do in terms of the draft picks that they do have. They have 6 picks in the top 4 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
They've got 3 picks in the top 68. Do they use any of those picks on a wide receiver? That's going to be interesting as well. And I know I also think, there's a possibility that if they can get their hands on a good tight end, because Dallas Goedert is, going to be back for one more year, but he's getting to the point where, he needs to be replaced in the next year or so, maybe year or two. It's going to be really interesting to see what Philadelphia does in the draft, because I don't know. I guarantee you're going to agree with me here. Bringing in Dontayvion Wicks and trading away AJ Brown is a loss for the Eagles offense.
Yes.
And the Eagles passing game is not going to be nearly as good without AJ Brown. If they go into next season and it's DeVonta Smith, Dontayvion Wicks, and Hollywood Brown, it's not really. I love Smith. The rest of they're mid. You know what I mean? Wicks hasn't proven anything.
Well, we should also mention
earlier, Hollywood's kind of had his, I think his best seasons are behind him. So I don't know that Philadelphia doesn't make another move. Like I said, I talked about why not throw a dart at, Brandon Ayuk, or throw a dart at one of these veterans, Tyreek Hill's out there. Maybe the Eagles aren't done at wide receiver. We're going to find that out. But from a New England perspective, it's a win everywhere. Well, unless you have Romeo Doubs, then his ceiling takes a hit. But Drake Maye now has AJ Brown, would have AJ Brown, Romeo Doubs, and the cast of characters he had last year. That's going to be a win for him. And New England suddenly has, the best wide receiver maybe since Randy Moss.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Edelman probably doesn't get to AJ Brown's tier. I mean, AJ Brown, when he's healthy, is a true dominant number one. So yeah, I think you're right. It's phenomenal for New England. I think it helps Drake Maye, who is, I think, already one of the best deep ball passers in the league. You get a legitimate deep threat. Dobbs can go into more of the Z receiver role, which I think is where he should be. I've never viewed him as an alpha number one receiver. I think he's a good starter, but not an elite one. And that allows you to have guys like Kyle Williams and Pop Douglas, fighting for that and, for the number 3 job. Kayshon Boutte, I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that's, kind of the odd man out. Maybe he ultimately gets traded. But I think for everybody in that offense, it just puts them in a really good spot. And I would be buying just about everybody at cost in New England.
The Patriots last year, and, listen, they made it to the Super Bowl. So, I mean, they did something right. They really lacked that big time playmaker in the passing game. I mean, Mac Hollins, was one of the guys
a couple
who
of
was making
huge games
plays
for them. Yeah.
Right. This is a much needed move if they are in fact going to be acquiring AJ Brown. And can we mention Mike Vrabel right now? I don't even know, but
no.
He has the relationship with Vrabel during their time together in Tennessee.
Which is why I think it makes so much sense, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So, and again, I don't know that Philadelphia would be done with those top 3 guys if Brown is in fact traded. I think they would be making moves. And there again, Deebo Samuel is out there. There's wide receivers, veteran wide receivers that the Eagles can bring in at a very reasonable price to fill the gap of AJ Brown. They won't be able to fill it. Listen, Samuel and Tyreek and Ayuk, they can't fill the shoes of AJ Brown, but they can certainly help in terms of making that group of wide receivers a little bit more attractive for Jalen Hurts in terms of throwing the football downfield.
Let me ask you this. Let's say there's a snag in the trade and AJ Brown doesn't go to New England. How much does that mess up everybody else in Philadelphia? Because now you've brought in all these receivers, and Wicks is going to be a pretty highly paid number 3 receiver. You've got Hollywood Brown, you've got Elijah Moore. Is it a situation where, yes, it's an incredibly a talented offense, but it's almost too talented that everybody's ceiling is going to be knocked down a peg?
It kind of becomes what Green Bay was, but not to the degree where you can't trust anybody, because in Green Bay you couldn't really trust anybody. I mean, maybe Romeo Dobbs.
Well, although
it's
think
not
about
going to change for AJ Brown or DeVonta Smith. They're going to continue to be who they are and who they've been, and then everybody else, it's a mess. So, do I want Dontayvion Wicks on an Eagles roster with AJ Brown? Not really.
Absolutely not.
Do I want Hollywood Brown regardless? Not really.
No.
So that would be. It would make no sense to me whatsoever. It would make no sense to me whatsoever.
That's why I've got to believe that Philadelphia has a trade agreement in place. We think it's with New England. Maybe it's with somebody else, but like none of their offseason moves make sense if Brown is staying, right? Because now you've just spent all of your available cap space on guys that might not see the field more than 30, 40% of the time. I don't get it.
And listen, man, unlike what we have in Dallas, Howie Roseman's smart as hell. And yes, that is a shot at Jerry Jones. And so I have a lot of faith in what he's going to do.
So do I.
What he's got in, up his sleeve, as they say. And I would not be surprised if Philadelphia comes out of this whole thing, as good a team as they were last year, if not better.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Make sure you subscribe and follow the podcast so you get all of the latest episodes. And on tomorrow's show, we're going to start taking a look at some of the quarterbacks down the draft board a little bit that could have an impact on your dynasty teams, including Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. So make sure you guys are tuning in for that. And if you guys never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Dynasty ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and so much more. Head over to lockedondynasty.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And on audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Follow Fabs on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.